When I was at Willow, when I first got there, we had 490 staff spread through, 7 different locations, but even in the building I was in, spread through literally 970,000 square feet. It would be natural to say when I'm having meetings with different staff, they're meeting in my office, and I would tell my assistant, get me out of my office as much as you possibly can. I want to get into other people's offices. Let's go meet in the atrium. Let's meet in central places, because that's where life's going to happen and where you're going to have your ear to the ground on things.
Hi, I'm James Forrest, and this is XP Leadership. If you're an executive pastor, you already know this is one of the most demanding and least visible roles in the church. Each episode, we hear from XPs across the country about what's actually working, navigating growth, managing pressure, leading teams, and staying healthy in the process. No fluff, just real conversations about life and leadership. Executive pastors rarely get the microphone, so this is where they do, and their perspective is too valuable to miss. Thanks for listening. Welcome to XP Leadership. I'm James Forrest, and this is a place where we talk all things executive pastor. If you're an XP, you are loved and you are in the right place. So today, I'm really grateful to have my friend, Tim Stevens, who's very much involved in this space, as my guest. Tim, thank you for saying yes to this.
Man, really grateful to be here. It's been fun deepening our friendship and partnership over the last, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, it really has been great. I look back and it's further and further in the rearview mirror. Funny how that works. And there's a lot of mutual synergies and clients and good things we've been able to do together. So I'm just really grateful for that.
Yeah, it's been fun. Love it.
So for those that don't know who you are, I could give the snapshot, but you'll of course do it better than me. I know you've got a lot of history in the business world, an XP world at Granger and Willow Creek specifically. And now you're in this spot where you get a bird's eye view leading other executive pastors across the country. That's a really unique spot. So just tell folks who don't know anything about you at all that might be listening just about your story personally and professionally.
Yeah, I spent 9 years, my first 9 years of my ministry career in a nonprofit ministry and got to know that side of things. Then founded this church we started attending and we just fell in love with as a brand new church, meeting in a movie theater this back in 1992. And joined that organization when I think I was the 5th staff person, and it was kind of like, come help us do stuff. And a year or two later, we called that executive pastor, and then stayed on staff there for 20 years. Church grew to about 6,000 in size, so it was just a ride. My goodness, of every day waking up thinking we have no idea what we're doing. We got to figure this out. Then I spent 6 years. I moved to Houston. Spent 6 years as a VP at Vanderbloemen, helping churches find staff and solve staffing problems. And then one of those problems we were solving was at Willow Creek with their lead pastor transition. And that new lead pastor asked me to come be the executive pastor there. And so I spent 4 years with him at Willow, helping just kind of turn around, rebuild, jump into some, real hard, broken church that was at a broken season, and helping them kind of recover. So that's still my home church, but stepped away 3 years ago this summer to start Leading Smart. I'd been doing it on the side for years, but to really scale it up into helping churches full time.
Tell us more about Leading Smart. I know about it, but I want our listeners to know
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. So we are doing quite a few different things. So we're doing a lot of work with succession, helping churches through transitions. A lot of times that's a founding pastor or a very long time pastor who's been there 20, 30 years plus. And we come in and start helping them about 3 to 5 years ahead of when they'd like to transition and get set for that. We're not doing searches for them, but we are helping them prep on the succession. I think my opinion is about 20% of a successful transition is the search itself, and about 80% is how you prepare for it. Doing a lot of that. We're doing a lot of work and crossing paths with you guys on board governance, helping. The profile of that often is a church that, man, they wrote bylaws 20 years ago when they were 400, and now they're 3,000 or 4,000, and it's just not working. And we actually don't do the bylaw work, but we go in and help them with the church governance side of things and how they can actually be healthy and operate well as a board, a functional board, where the board is governing and not managing. And so that's fun. People think I'm crazy when I think that's fun, but I actually think it's kind of fun. And then we're doing a lot of coaching, one-on-one coaching with executive pastors or lead pastors. We're doing some gatherings for executive pastors and lead pastors, and we're doing what I call just like advising with a church that's maybe in a little bit of crisis or a little bit of a reset season where we'll just come in and sit with them for a season, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and help them walk through some critical decisions.
I've really enjoyed being a part of it personally. Michael Best is obviously a sponsor of Leading Smart. It's really good stuff for those that are listening that don't know anything about this. You should check out the website, check out the content, the gatherings. Just a really meaningful community of executive pastors that are, creating real relationships, resourcing each other, challenging each other, encouraging each other. It's really cool to see what's happened in 3 short years, Tim. Congrats on that, and it's amazing to watch from a kingdom perspective.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun. It's been a ride. And some days I say, why didn't I start doing this 10, 15 years ago? And then I realized because I didn't know what I needed to know 10 to 15 years ago. And just the experience in the last 40 years of ministry has really set me up for this.
Yeah, and before we get into substance, I mean, I will say in this kind of XP space, sometimes there's like this big church machismo, kind of alpha male stuff out there. My church is bigger than yours, and you really just, I think, with your personality and your demeanor, kind of don't portray that, and you could, right? Because you've done some of the biggest stuff in the world from an XP front, and I think that's really endearing to people and inviting to people, and creates an atmosphere where people can really learn from each other, which is what we should be doing, in the first place.
Yeah, well, that's what I hope comes across because I really I just feel blessed to have been in the spaces I've been in and been able to serve where I've been able to serve. So it's cool now to kind of be in a stage of life where I get to more and more and more pass that along to other leaders that are coming up.
Exactly. I love it. So let's talk about that. I want to give our listeners as much exposure to you and your wisdom as we can. So in the next, little while that we have together, and you think about the role of the executive pastor over the last 20, 25 years, what can you point to in terms of changes, maybe perhaps how that role's got more complex?
Yeah, I mean, it really has. When I started, I'll go back a little bit further than that. So, about 30 years ago, starting at my first church as an executive pastor at Granger in Indiana. I mean, there were very few multi-site churches. What was interesting, we were actually at Granger kind of multi-site before we knew it because we were meeting in a movie theater and then our building wasn't ready and we were out of space. So we started meeting in a school too. So we were a multi-site church before we were actually a single site church, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, that has really changed in the complexity of just most. I mean, if you looked in the mid '90s at the lists of the largest churches or the fastest growing churches, there wasn't but 1 or 2 in a list of 100 that were multi-site, and now it's a vast majority, and so the complexity that's required from the executive pastor seat, or in sometimes more and more I see now the multiple executive pastors that are, helping to manage the organization. I mean, that's changed pretty significantly, and the complexity has gone up, the type of leader that's, required for that.
Right. When you think about the most critical issues that are facing executive pastors today, what comes to mind?
I think a few things come to mind. One would be navigating, um, I'm gonna just use the word loosely scandals, but just things, crises that come up. And I think, with social media, where things can, you can become aware of things much more quickly than you used to be able to be. And sometimes they're true and sometimes they're not. And you have to navigate all of the PR around that, navigate finding the truth around that. Um, I remember the first time I went through that at Granger, and this was pre-social media, but when we had an accusation and it's like, no one trained me on what to do when someone walks in and says, "Hey, this is what your youth pastor did to me when I was,
Right.
um, a senior in high school," and
I
it's
don't
like,
think there's
"Oh,
classes for that in seminary, right?
no, there's not." And I think to whatever level those were happening, and I don't know how we'd measure it metric-wise, but to whatever level it was happening 25 years ago, it's happening 10x now, and, for multiple reasons. So I think that's a complexity. Um, I was talking to someone, an attorney when I was at Willow, who helped us with some, help us navigate some difficult situations, and at one point, it's just like a frustration. Why do we even have to be facing this? And he said, well, welcome to employment law in 2023 or whatever it was. So it's just become so much more complex. I think AI is making things more complicated. It's helping us, and it's also making things more complicated. So a number of things, yeah, are really upping the complexity.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I talk with XPs a lot, and there's kind of two things happening at once. The church is growing. Oh, well, so some churches are staying flat or decreasing, but many are growing, right? So by its very nature, it's going to become more complex with business operations and systems and people and those kind of things. But at the same time, our culture is more litigious, more divisive. PR becomes a huge piece of it that didn't used to be that way before social media and the internet. Um, and then you throw that in with, there's the every now and then the scandal or the moral failure or the power dispute or whatever it might be, and it's this pretty complicated mix of dynamics that no one's really seen before. It's interesting times.
Yeah, really is. And I mean, you're just seeing, I saw a report this morning from a church that's dear to me, that's nearby, and senior pastor just released. And so you're seeing those things over and over and over again. And maybe they were happening 25 years ago, but we sure didn't hear about them as much. And I think the ease at which it is to shoot arrows at a leader on social media, whether you have reason to or not, is just the ease is there. And so then you have to deal with it because it's out there.
What's your advice to those that feel that? There might be XPs listening and they're like, "Yep, got it, living it every day, feel it." I mean, what's your advice to those folks in the trenches that feel the complexity maybe starting to overwhelm them a little bit?
Boy, I think you have to surround yourself with both good counsel, but good friends as well. And that's what, the gatherings that you and I have been able to hang out at. You get you get a few people sitting in the same seat you're sitting at in a different place. And our goal going in, as you know, is always like, I hope everyone walks out with three or four exchanged contacts that they can just, reach out and say, hey, here's what I'm going through. I remember you just went through this and now I'm in it. And I think we have to have that. Um, and there's no like, it's not like, okay, this comes up, follow these 10 steps exactly, and you'll get through it. It's like, it's so organic and different and unique and contextual. And, it takes wisdom. It takes people that have kind of went around the block a few times to be walking with you through it. Um, but it also just takes, you're just making decisions like kind of in wartime, so to speak, that you're having to, that's where just having wise people around you, whether they're, actual partners, people that you're paying to help you, or they're just friends in the mix with you.
Yeah. Yeah, we get the privilege at our firm working with several hundred churches across the country, and my anecdotal observation with XPs is that there's a surprisingly low percentage in a peer group, in some sort of cohort or conference that they go to, and they're just kinda going it alone, and if you hold that intention with how complex it's getting, that's kind of a recipe for disaster, right? To be in
Yeah.
it by yourself, right? So, whether it's your group or any other group, I think one of the messages is, don't go it alone, personally or professionally. It's too hard.
It's too hard, it's too lonely, it's too isolating, and when we get lonely and get isolated, then we don't make good choices. So I think that's exactly right.
In terms of recent trends, you mentioned AI. We're doing a lot of that work. We've talked a lot about this at conferences that we've both been at. Is there, and you didn't mention that, I got the succession, the bylaws, and the coaching, but, do you have any, kind of words of wisdom around AI for folks?
I just spent the last hour and a half I'm in a Claude Collective, it's called, but it's a, once a month, gathering of people in ministry, either in churches or adjacent to ministry, that are trying to figure this out. And so, I'm mostly excited, about what AI is, bringing and able to do and able to help. ministry folks with. I know there's a lot of complexity around it related to privacy and around just originality of work and IP and all that. But um, but I'm mostly excited because I think what it's going to do. I think church leaders different than business leaders or corporate leaders. Like church leaders have one fantastic asset, and that's volunteers. That a lot of corporate people don't have volunteers, right? They have to pay everyone to get stuff done for them. In the church, we have volunteers, and which allows us to to get more done with fewer dollars. Um, and I think AI is another aspect of that. It's enabling, and this is true corporate as well, but it's enable us to get more done with fewer dollars. Now, you're reading articles all the time about corporations that are spending, tens of thousands, if not tens of millions, on tokens for their AI. And are they actually saving money, or is that money just going somewhere else? I don't know. But I think in the church context, just the what it can do to help us pastor people, I think more effectively. There's just so much there, and it's changing every day. The technology, like just in my lifetime, from internet, getting email and internet and kind of moving away from fax machines. That was a slow bake. That was a slow roll. We were getting, 300 baud and then 2,400 baud. And then, and so we were slowly rolling into that. And then like the next big significant thing was the smartphone. And, iPhone's first couple phones weren't really very smart. They didn't have any apps. And then iPhone 3 hits and it's got these apps and so that was over 10 or 12, 15 years, that kind of, but AI is happening instantly in front of us every single day, literally that I log on, there's something new that it's like, I think if I explore that, that could actually help me. So that's exciting. I mean, for me, from where I said I'm a little bit of a technical geek, it's exciting. And I think the way I see it helping pastors and churches, I think there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah. It is interesting times. We've talked about this. The adoption rate for AI is crazy compared to like the internet, even the internet. And the internet was somewhat fast, and
Yep.
it is changing every day, every week, every month. I mean, we're looking at it very closely in legal and professional services. I'm curious. I assume you haven't seen churches pull back workforce, layoffs, anything like that. I mean, the threat is, AI is going to replace people, and it's probably more akin to AI is going to replace people that don't use AI, right? Like you're gonna have to have people that use AI.
That's it. That's it. I think that's it. I have not heard of one case, I'm sure there's something out there, but of one instance of a church laying someone off because they got replaced with AI. But I have heard churches and organizations that I work with that are expecting and requiring you to be AI proficient when you come in. And it's interesting talking to some young people that are like early to mid 20s. I don't know if this is a trend or if this is just anecdotally the 20 somethings that I talk to, but I've come across many that are like they are anti AI. They feel like it's killing the planet and they will go nowhere near it. And I just wonder, is what kind of job can they get 10 years from now, 5 years from now, if that's a stance they take? And I know there's problems to be solved climate wise, but um, I do think that requirement of like you have to be AI savvy, and then as an organization, we got to figure out how what are the parameters in which we allow that to happen.
Yeah, I just posted something on social a couple days ago. The first time I heard of this, there was some case law that came out where someone was, you know, there was the religious exemption for the vaccine stuff, but somebody's now claiming a religious exemption from having to use AI. Like work said you must use AI, and someone said no, it's against my religion, and that's being kind of teased out. So interesting times for sure. Let's shift to m- pivoting and malleability and flexibility. So you've been a part of a lot of large organizations, seen a lot of growth. I wonder if there's a situation where you're comfortable sharing where an approach worked brilliantly at one phase, and the tendency, right, is kind of keep doing the same thing over and over. That's kind of what we do as it's humanity. But then you either realize the on the front end or the hard way that hey, whatever we were doing here doesn't work at this new phase of growth.
Yeah. Um, Interesting. I'm trying to think of an example in a church context. I can think of one in a business context that I've experienced recently. And so that's we've been doing these gatherings for years, right? And so for probably 5 years, and it's just interesting. And we track kind of when did we first announce it? How quickly did the registrations come in? Was it week 6 or month 4 that we actually filled all the spots? And it's interesting to me, like, how, like, there's consistency in that every single year, and then this year, suddenly the consistency's changed. And the consistency before was, like, if we get it out there, like, 6 months to 9 months out early, then people will sign up in that time frame and get it on their calendar. What I'm finding now is they're, like, waiting much longer. And so, whereas in the past for one of those gatherings, we would have, like, once we got past maybe 3 months ahead, we get 0 additional registrations. Now we're seeing a bunch of them come in that less than 3 months ahead of time. So I it's like a pivot thing. It's like, okay, because before we're able to, like, make commitments and write contracts and stuff for the facilities and the food and all that, because we were pretty sure we knew exactly how that was gonna line up. And now, it's just pivoting. And I think pivoting is a word that I think during COVID we all got tired of because it was just part of our everyday life. But um, I do think um, again, back to AI, just because of AI, like, we're just even in how we're um, interacting with people, what they're walking into, their expectations. Like, I just assume now, and this has probably only been true in the last 6 months. I assume every single meeting I'm in, whether it's on video or whether it's in a room, is being recorded, and there's AI notes being taken, whether I was told that or not. I'm just assuming that. And so then you're kind of having to. That's a new thing. That's like, okay, what does that mean? Do we have certain meetings where we, exclude it? How do we track that? How do we police that and so forth?
Well, the AI thing is an example of malleability, right? I mean, one option is just to keep doing it the same way we've always done it, but it's not what good business people do. I'd argue it's not what good XPs do. You're gonna have to be malleable at some level. That doesn't mean you do follow every trend. You use your brain and stewardship. Think it through a biblical lens, etc. At the same time, but I see it a lot with my kind of bird's eye view into churches where it's like, hey, this worked, we're so excited about it. It might even be a part of my identity now. So then it becomes really hard to let go of that when the circumstances clearly say kind of a new approach is needed.
I was just another example that does relate to church that I experienced in my time at Willow. I would say prior to, I'm going to say maybe 6 years ago, a church could have a policy of, like, we're not going to respond to anything that any rumors on social media or anything that comes from a blogger. We're just going to ignore that. We're just going to, if it's a legit journalist, we'll respond to that. And just kind of we'll focus on our people and just communicate well to them. Well, I think a pivot I think that's happened is, like, we actually have to pay attention to that now. In several churches I'm working with now, where they get, like, just something starts on social media, and it can be just someone spouting off, but then that kind of builds some credibility and builds some volume, and then without actual information, people just make stuff up. And so, if we as a church or we as an institution organization don't actually write the narrative, which we're concerned, we don't want to do that because we don't want to be defensive, but we kind of have to say something because otherwise people are believing what they hear. I think that's a change just in the
Yeah.
last 6 years.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. I think we do PR at Michael Best too, for our clients. And the advice used to be 98% of the time, just ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Just ignore it. Um, and it is a little bit different now because of kind of the times that we're in. Let's talk about hard conversations. I'm sure you've had a few of those over your career. And what do you say to those XPs who are hard conversation averse? It's not natural to them. And quite frankly, I think that's mostly a good thing, right? Like most people don't love that. So they're not alone in that. But any words of advice around hard conversations, maybe a particular type of hard conversation that XPs tend to not do well?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, I do think it's probably good. It's a better characteristic than someone who absolutely loves conflict and loves running into, like, um so I think most of us are a little bit conflict averse, and we don't love it. Our heart beats a little bit faster when we're going to that conversation because we don't want to have that conversation. Um, so a couple thoughts around it. One would be, Rarely do I see things get better on their own. Whether it's an employee situation, competence issue, integrity, like it's not like, "Hey, well, let's just leave it alone and see what happens." Occasionally, it resolves itself. Most of the time, I don't see that happening. And so I think like pushing through the awkward, like going through the tunnel of conflict, having the conversation. Another thing I would say in that is go into it like really seeking to understand. And we can go into those conversations one of two ways. One is like we have all of the data we need and we're kind of shooting down a hole. Um, Waiting for you to tell all the truth that we already know. And maybe we do hold a large bit of data or truth in that going in that conversation. But I think going in like being curious, seeking to understand, believing the best where we can, I think just changes the tenor of the conversation. And then for XP specifically, the hardest, and this is probably true of any role, but we're talking to XPs right now. The hardest is the conversation up, kind of speaking truth to power. And we don't like to think about a lot of times like senior lead pastors, any of us don't like to think, "Oh, it's not power. I don't really hold the power." But you do if on the org chart you're you're above that person on the org chart, then you do have there is that um, dynamic tension within power. And it's always hard. It's always hard to speak truth. And when I say truth, I'm not talking about Bible truth. I'm talking about like whatever your truth is that you're concerned that you're carrying, that you may need to check against them because it may or may not be accurate. But when you have something like that, that's hard, really hard. And what I would say in those conversations is just pay attention to timing, because just because it's the right thing to say and it needs to be said doesn't mean today it needs to be said. And sometimes it does. Sometimes absolutely needs to be said the minute you hear about it, but not all the time. So pay attention to timing and wisdom. And I think that's where back to earlier conversation we had about just that council of good friends and people that can speak into you. And I would say those people in these kinds of situations, those people should be away. They should not be part of your church or part of your staff. If you're talking about a hard conversation you need to have with your lead pastor, get some advice from someone who's um, not local, not proximate, but is wise and can help you think through the timing on that.
Yeah. I often think about parallels between the business world and the church world because I get a bird's eye view into both. And it is a similarity in the church and the business world that feedback up is always hard, right? Because they can fire you.
Yeah,
And they've got, financial control in some ways. So that is a similarity. But one of the differences is if that relationship with XP and lead pastor fall apart, not only may you not work there and it impacts you financially, but it is your church community in many ways,
that's
right?
right.
And that is such a unique wrinkle. And I've got community with the people down the hall here, but it's different in a church community. And so with all that at risk, I think it's helpful to acknowledge and say it out loud. Hey, this is hard. This is hard for me to say. I think XPs will be listening to this. If they're senior pastors listening, I think they need to understand that dynamic too, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes invite that feedback because there's these headwinds for that information to flow up.
that's good. I think that's exactly right. There's so much at stake, and not just you personally, your family. Like my kids are in the student group. Like if this goes south, I may have to pull my kids out of this church. We may have to move to another state to find employment. My wife's going to lose all her. I mean, it's all that stuff that's layered in.
Yeah. Let's talk about blind spots. Obviously, this will be a gross generalization, but you know a lot of XPs, and you know some really good ones, some average ones, maybe some ones that are in the bottom quartile, what have you. But if you could generalize them, what do you think is a potential blind spot for executive pastors right now?
Uh, I don't know when you added the word right now. I'm not sure it's just right now, but like over my career, I would say um, information flows downhill. So sometimes as the executive pastor, like a lot of executive pastors have they've been in another role at the church, or they're coming in. Maybe they've been a business person in the church, and they're coming in because the lead pastor's pulling his hair out, and he just needs someone to like help me lead the staff, help me lead the organization, help me run things operationally. And so, and we get a lot of feedback from staff, so we feel like we're hearing all of the truth, and we feel like, again, speaking upward, up to power is like we feel like they're not getting all the truth. We are getting all the truth. But that's not true either. Like information flows downhill, does not flow uphill. So I think the minute you move into a leadership position at all, is the last minute that you hear the complete truth, and it's because of the power dynamics again. And so I think that's a blind spot. We can think that we actually have a pretty clear view on exactly how the organization is feeling and doing, and our pulse on that. Where I see that come alive is we'll do like just culture surveys and helping church staff figure out how to improve health wise organizationally. And what's interesting is when we ask the executive or senior pastor or sometimes the whole lead team, how are we doing? How's the staff culture? How's the staff health? Whatever they say, I absolutely know, and it's been 100% of the time when I ask the rest of the staff, if they rate it here, it's going to be slightly lower than that, or maybe a lot lower than that. So there's always a brighter view on how we're doing at the lead level than there is further down the organization, and that's just because information flows downhill, not uphill. And so I think how do we counteract that is like we just have to have a heart of curiosity and a heart of like seeking to understand. And what they used to say, what, decades ago, management by wandering around. Um, I don't know if that's a actually good management philosophy, but I do think it helps us get out and around. When I was at Willow, when I first got there, we had 490 staff. And so, spread through, 7 different locations, but even in the building I was in, spread through literally 970,000 square feet. So it would be natural to say when I'm having meetings with different staff, they're meeting in my office, and I would tell my assistant, "Get me out of my office as much as you possibly can. I want to get into other people's offices. Let's go meet in the atrium. Let's meet in central places because that's where life's going to happen and where you're going to have your ear to the ground on things." And then I think having some kind of maybe a formalized, if your staffs are super large, maybe it's a formalized actual like advisory team, culture team, whatever you want to call it, but people that are kind of through very diverse as far as where they sit in the organization. Brand new, long tenured, the very bottom of the org chart, middle to top of the org chart, like just get people that can actually, and your whole job, your whole purpose with them is just, I just need you guys to tell me the truth. And there will never be any ramifications, consequences for you telling me the truth. But I just need to know, I'm not, this isn't a gossip session, but I just need to know like, what's the general sense and general feel right now and on the
Yeah.
staff.
It's good stuff, man. One of the things we do around here is try to create a culture of asking what we can do better, and
Yeah.
that's only effective if that starts at the top, right? So it's a really dangerous question to ask your client, "Hey, what can I do better?" It's a dangerous question to ask your colleague, like, "How do you perceive me? What can I do better?" It's a humble question. And it's an others focused question, but it's a dangerous question because, we don't know what they're gonna say, and we're afraid of what they're gonna say. Um,
And I've heard people say, like, when you ask that question, it's almost like the third or fourth time you ask it before the person actually believes that you mean it, until they've been around you for a while, and then they realize you actually really do want to know. But I think a lot of us have had a leader ask us the question, and then we realize very quickly they were not listening to the answer, they didn't want the answer, and so you get a little bit like gun shy from that. And so you then someone asks you that really means it, you're probably gonna wait to see do they really mean it before you're
yeah,
actually gonna
I
answer.
mean, because like, yeah, I appreciate that example because they could just be asking to figure out whether or not you're on their team or not.
That's right.
Hey, do you think I'm great? I need you to tell me I'm great.
Yep. Yep. I've heard that actual story.
Uh, those numbers at Willow are crazy. I mean, those are huge numbers. Would you want to talk a little bit about that season? We could talk playbooks and initiatives and all these different things, but I think one of the things that you do really well and you bring to the table is you understand timing and you understand certain seasons. I mean, is there something you'd share about that experience or otherwise where you're kind of weighing, hey, we could go do this thing, this initiative that I know can work. Like it makes all the sense in the world from an X's and O's perspective, but the timing just isn't right. We need to be
Yeah.
sensitive to where we are.
Yeah. One, I mean, I think in our early time there, like the first 6 to 12 months, a lot of was happening in the world. COVID was well underway. And we were walking into this organization that was very, very, very hurt, scarred from leadership failure. And we weren't the leaders that failed them, but we were still leaders that were brought in and that brought in maybe by people who failed them. And there was just a sense of like, we can't trust leadership. And so a lot of bad behavior, especially. And I think one thing I had people at the time advising, well, just fire them, figure out who they are and get rid of them. And what we did, like, that would be unexpected, and in another healthy season, we'd have maybe have a shorter leash on that, but in that season, it's like, hurt people, and we just have to understand that, I mean, to no fault of their own, they're in this church is in this situation, and there's a lot of people here that are broken and exhausted and hurt because of that, and bad behavior is gonna come out. So we gave a lot of freedom. Example, that would be in one of our Zoom, this was when the world was still shut down, in one of our Zoom staff meetings. So you got hundreds of people in the staff meeting, staff room in Zoom. And one of the staff people logs in anonymously and starts just ripping on the senior pastor. Well, he didn't realize IP addresses and all the stuff. So we knew within 5 minutes after that meeting was over who on our staff did that. And everything in you would say, you got to fire that guy. Um, And our senior pastor brought him in and just said, "You know why we're meeting?" "Yes, I do." And had the conversation, but said, "That's not gonna happen again, right? That's not gonna happen again." And that person stayed on staff. And so that was like, a time when we were really just a season, like reading the season, reading the moment, and realizing what we could do then, that maybe we couldn't do another time. I think, another season at Willow would be, we had to go through a season where we knew we couldn't afford the staff that we had. We knew that there was probably scores, if not 100 or more staff that really didn't wanna be there. We knew that COVID had shut the world down, so they couldn't leave if they wanted to. Um, and, we could have gone down the route of like, "Okay, we gotta find every person who's kind of like, um, advocating, working against us, and, like, just we gotta root them out." What we did instead is, we just said, "Hey, we got a season here." I think it was 3 weeks. Basically, for the next 3 weeks, if you wanna resign for any reason at all, we'll actually, provide a generous severance, for that to happen, and it could be any reason whatsoever. And, what it allowed us to do is it allowed us, rather than to kind of go after people that were maybe behaving badly, um, it enabled us just to, like, actually bless them. It's like, you don't wanna be here. This is a tough season for you, this tough season for the church, and so we're gonna kinda bless you to leave." And so we had over 100 people take us up on that, and we lost some people that were like, man, they were awesome people, and they just were, like, taking the advantage of it because their grandkids are on the East Coast, and it's just they're gonna go move. But we also were able to kind of, like, reset culture a bit in that season without having to, like, put people up on a trial.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff, man. Really good stuff. Let's move to underperformance. That's a topic that we hear a lot when we're gathering with XPs. Yeah, I love your talk. I've actually taken notes several times about the 4 quadrants or performance, right? And how do you deal with underperformance? That kind of ties into the hard conversation piece. We focused in on, talking up with senior pastor, but let's talk more down with staff, right? You by the very math, you've got some bottom quartile people on your team. You got some bottom half people on your team. What's your thoughts on how you tackle underperformance?
Yeah, and I would say in the chart you referenced, I would distinguish between performance and culture. So performance and just health as an individual team player, the way that they live out our values. And I think both of them are equally important, meaning if someone's poor in performance, that's a problem. Even if they're really high in culture, we still have to have some conversations around that. Maybe it's just moving them to someplace else in the organization. But if they're low on culture and high in performance, they're just like a super performer, crushing their role. But no one likes working with them. They're not a team player. They're kind of an island to their own. They're building their own kingdom. They don't really care about the overall mission, vision of the church. That's equally a problem. Those often get ignored because they're a high performer and because like because any executive pastor at any given time. I was talking to one yesterday. He's like he said, "Do I just have to get used to the fact that something's going to be on fire?" And this is a church of 10,000. And I said, "Yep, absolutely." At that scale, I mean, there's always, and even a smaller church, at that, there's just the executive pastor is always gonna be dealing with something. So when you have a high performer, that's something you don't have to think about. But actually you do if they're low on culture because it's eroding your team in ways that you don't even see. And you might be, because you're ignoring that, you might be losing some really high gifted, high talented, high culture people because they're not gonna put up with it. So, um, I would say it's back to the hard conversations. I would say if you've identified performance as an issue and or culture, value connection is an issue that those conversations need to start. And um, sometimes if it's a performance issue, sometimes it's maybe our fault because we haven't really defined what job expectations are for that role. So maybe it's like there's some misunderstanding there. We haven't defined it well. So own some of that if we need to, but then, like, let's clarify it, let's get it in writing, and let's hold them to it. And on the value side too, sometimes people just need to be reminded, um, like, not living up to our values, what we've agreed to as a staff, is actually disqualifying. And so we just got to call each other on it. And sometimes you got to make a move because of that. So I would say it goes back to like you got to push through those conversations. And I would also say like you don't. Most churches that we work with, if they don't already have it, we encourage them and we help them build out a lead team. So I think that conversation as an executive pastor with your lead team, which is usually not just your lead pastor, it's usually two or three or four others that may work for you or maybe at your level, doesn't matter, but you have a lead team. So you can say, hey, am I seeing this correctly? Let me tell you the problem I'm having with Joe in either performance or culture. Help me, poke holes in this. Help me see if I'm seeing this right. Is anyone else seeing this? Here's how I'm thinking about approaching it, working with HR if you have an HR team, to make sure you go through it properly. But I think those things, back to, they typically don't go away on their own. You have to address it in some way.
Yeah. I love that you were honest with your XP that you were talking to that just said, yeah, yeah, you're going to be dealing with those things. I can tell immediately when I'm talking to an XP client whether they've kind of been there, done that, meaning that they've experienced that fire, whatever that thing is, right? Because sometimes people have all these questions. They're like, why should I spend money on this or that? And I totally get that, right? Because every minute dollar not spent on me is back into ministry forward things, which is great. Um, However, just back to the culture that we're living in now, the times, the complexity, like yes, they're just our fires pretty much all the time.
Yep. Yep. It's the nature of people work. It's
Yeah.
just, and
And then on the
especially,
underperformance
yeah,
point, one of the things I talk to clients a lot about is the importance of performance reviews. I know you're big on performance reviews and 360 feedback and all those things, but a lot of times our churches will look to make a move, terminate somebody, and we're like, "Why? Why? They're not doing a good job." Okay, cool. Can you send us their performance reviews? And there are none, or they send them to us, and they're glowing because we're too nice to have actual constructive conversation. So, there's this theme of like, look, you don't want to walk around with a chip on your shoulder and be the bad guy all the time, but on the other side of that, I think the other side of that coin is you do want to have honest, constructive feedback and conversations that move the organization forward. And
that's right.
sometimes they're not going to be comfortable.
Yeah, that's good.
Let's talk about XP development. You do a lot of this with Leading Smart, but how should XPs be developing the next gen? How are you developing the next gen of XPs, and what do you see going on in that space?
Yeah, I love that. I was talking to we're holding a gathering in Chicago, which I know you'll be at, James, for church XPs of large churches that are 5,000 and larger. And a couple of them are bringing with them like someone that they have in development. I've got one guy said, "Is it okay? Can I bring this person? They're not an XP, but they're going to be. They're going to be. I see them as my replacement." So I love that. I think that's to me like getting someone to shadow, bringing with you team experiences. Uh, I've heard of churches like when I just talked about lead team a few minutes ago. I've heard of churches that they'll always have one or two kind of developmental people sitting in on their lead teams, and just so they can learn and ask questions and get those experiences before they're actually in that seat. I think if you can divvy off parts of your role, even if it doesn't completely make sense, but you just know that person's ready and that person had some bandwidth. I did this at Willow. I went in there about 4 months after we got there. We decided, hey, let's have a team of three executive pastors, and so I moved into this role, executive pastor of campuses, and I had seven campus pastors working with me, and so overseeing seven people's a pretty okay span of care. I didn't need to divvy that up, but I had one of the guys who was just ready. He was, really probably using about 60% of his capacity to run his fast growing campus, and he just had leadership capacity beyond that. And so I just kind of divvied it up and said, "Hey, would you take these three campus pastors and you develop them, and I'll take these other three." And I had uh, people around me said, "Why are you doing that, Tim? Like, are you overworked? Do you need, do you have too much to do?" I was like, "No, not at all. I need to develop this guy and give him opportunities." So I think those kinds of things. I think if you can spot that. I love finding someone who's in their 20 somethings or early 30s, and like, let's just what's the capacity there? And we don't necessarily want to elevate 24-year-old or 26-year-old to this level yet, but we can start getting them ready for that by giving them opportunities. And I also think like those of us who are more seasoned slash older, we have like um, social equity, social capital. In other words, like you just saying, James, like for you and me, like all of the connections that we have around the country with high capacity, high level church leaders. And so we can open some doors for these younger leaders that they're not even in those rooms yet, and get them in those rooms and get them exposed to some of those folks that can, and that'll just, um, I think, turbocharge their education and their development into those roles.
I love that, man. One of the complaints I hear, or the pushback I hear from XPs on this "who's my plus one" idea, like who am I bringing along, is it's inefficient. And they won't say it out loud, but you can kinda tell it's like it becomes less about me, and I'm not trying to bang on XPs, but I think we should have honest conversations, right? Yeah, it actually does make you more inefficient to bring someone else
It
along.
does,
It does,
absolutely.
right? But what are we solving for? Are we solving for efficiency, or are we solving for the long-term sustainability of the organization? And it's also true that as we bring along plus ones, we might feel threatened by that, right? We kind of built this little fiefdom of power, and power, as we know, and many times, like unchecked, like, you know, can go a way that we don't want it to go. So I think saying those things out loud is really helpful for folks just to hear and say, and I appreciate your perspective on that a lot.
Another thing I'll just say real quick, when we work with churches at the board level, we encourage them to have an annual conversation. It can be 10 minutes, it can be an hour, it doesn't matter, but an annual conversation about succession. And usually they think, okay, that's about lead pastor succession. I think if the church is medium to large, it should be a layer below that. Executive pastor, maybe your whole lead team. At Willow, it was our lead team and our campus pastors. So what that did is it forced us by a system. We had a system where we were going to annually talk about it. So it forced everyone at that level to be thinking through, who am I developing? Like, if I got hit by the bus tomorrow, is there anyone I would recommend to the organization take my place? It's like, if there's no one on that list, then we need to get someone on that list. So I think that like you can systemize some of that and help your team kind of be thinking about that.
Yeah. All right, landing the plane here soon, my friend. I know your time is valuable. Let's talk about big wins, or maybe things that you would change. So, is there something that sticks out that maybe you're most proud of your career as you look back? And then, is there also something you're comfortable sharing where, man, I kind of missed that, or we missed that, and I wish I would have done it differently?
Yeah. So on something I'm proud of, so I'm on my fifth job in my 41-year career. Um, Fifth organization, fifth job. Not maybe not job because I've had different jobs at a organization, but fifth organization that I've worked for. And what I feel really good about, and I didn't think about this till just a few days ago. I was talking to someone else. Is I haven't burned bridges leaving any of those organizations, and I don't know, anecdotally, 80% of people burning bridges when they leave a church. And it's almost like, or an organization, but specifically church. I think it's like in a church specifically, there's something unique about that, that when I leave, I have to somehow have a reason for why the organization was bad, and that's the reason I'm going to the next place. And I don't think you have to do that. I don't think you have to say anything um, negative as you're leaving. I think you can point to we all have like a push and a pull when we change organizations where there's like the pull may be like I'm just getting pulled to this vision of this next place. Like for me at Willow, that was true. There was this pull to like I want to help Willow recover. And so then that was probably a 90% pull, but there was also like a 10% push of things that I didn't love about where I was at. And what we do sometimes is we just elevate those things to like make it because we have to have an enemy to point at to justify the reason. And I would say, no, you don't. Like you can actually leave an organization really well, leave organizations well, and have a good leave. Um, on the regret side of things, I think I'm a I think sometimes, and I can think of one time in those career shifts for sure, I outstayed probably 2 years, longer than I should have. And I didn't see that till I was looking in the rearview mirror. But but I think sometimes because we, I'll just speak for me, because like our identity is so much, especially if you've been at a church for a long time, your identity's there, your small groups are there, your relationships are there, you're marrying and burying, like it's all the stuff. Um, that it's really hard to be objective, because of that, and to know, I think this is the right time for the organization and or this is the right time for me, to pull away. So I think I outstayed myself, outstayed a couple years at in one of those leaves. I think, one other one I'll say just real quick too is like, I think, earlier in my career, moving too quickly, at one of the organizations I worked at, we had our culture pretty dialed in, and we would move pretty quickly to exit people who didn't, weren't dialed into the culture. And I think in some cases didn't give people enough chance. I think that's actually a good thing is to have your culture dialed in, but I think, we weren't asking enough questions and we weren't doing enough to develop them into our culture, for a season and one of my stops that I just, wish it would have slowed down a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing those things, man.
Yeah.
The XP role carries a fair amount of pressure and often little spotlight. What habits or disciplines have helped you sustain over the long term in terms of clarity, whole health, well being?
One that comes quick to mind is just like I am fanatical about calendar blocking. And what I mean by that is like calendar block in this conversation is calendar blocking your health. So I've got next March, I got a week blocked on for a vacation. So it's date nights. When the kids were at home, it was time with the kids individually once a month blocked. It's date nights with my wife. Um, it's think time if you just need like think time where you're not having meetings because you need that to help grow your organization or build your business. Um, whatever it is, whatever that's like most important to you to stay healthy in all the areas you need. It could be exercise, it could be quiet time, it could be whatever it is, like to calendar block that. And that doesn't mean that, I mean, things are going to pop up. I get that, and it doesn't mean that like something pops up next March and I'm absolutely can't do it. It's like no, I'm just going to move that week because it's calendar blocked for a week. I'm going to move that week somewhere else. It's still going to happen. But I think that's a system for me, so the things that I know, like, in my heart are the most important aren't gonna happen if I don't calendar block. So it's for me, it's systemize the most important things so that they happen and the other things can fit around that if they can.
So good, man. It reminds me of like the big rock, little rock thing. Put the big rocks in
Yep.
first and not the little rocks. And I remember back, I've been at Michael Best 4 years now, and I used to have my own firm. It was called Forest Firm. My name was on the door, and I would come home, and my life was filled with little rocks. Right, all the tyranny of the urgent had taken over my life, and
Yeah.
encroached. I had not done a good job of blocking for my wife and my kids, and physical fitness and spiritual disciplines and all these different things. And I remember coming home one day and having a conversation with my wife, and she looked at me and she said, "Your name's on the door, right?" My wife's great, man.
You're actually in charge.
She said, "Your name's on the door, like, you could change your calendar around, right?" So, anyway, that's really good stuff, man, and really wise and really valuable. And I would even say for the younger XPs, do that now before you feel like you actually need to. You don't wanna
Yeah,
be behind that, you wanna be ahead of that. Literally put the big rocks in first. Even if you feel like you're working 40 hours a week, you could do it in your sleep. Put the time, the spiritual disciplines, the physical discipline, the time with your spouse on the calendar now so that because life's gonna get more complex, your church
it
is gonna
is.
grow, your roles and
Yep.
responsibilities are gonna grow. Really, really good stuff.
Yeah, it's good. Great conversation.
Yeah, man. What's one thing people don't know about you?
I was gonna say that I'm a rabid Notre Dame football fan, but a lot of people know that about me,
Okay.
so,
All right, good.
won't mention that. Um, I played French horn, and went to 2 national competitions and placed. I didn't get first place for either, but, I
Wow.
did place.
You know,
So, yeah, but haven't touched it since I was a senior in high school.
I have a limited number of people that I know. It's a small minority of XPs that are musical. Typically, they're not the same, but there are a few. You are my only French horn XP guy.
Well, what's interesting is the other XP at Willow, his name's Matt Sunstead, also played French horn. So we had 2
Really?
XPs next to each other,
Wow.
played French horn.
That is quite the fast fact.
Yeah.
If folks want to get in touch with you, Tim, how should they do that?
Yeah, our website's leadingsmart.com. My email is tim@leadingsmart.com. If you wanna book a call with us, I think right on the website it says, "Let's talk," and that pops into, my calendar or Holly's calendar, who's my associate there, and we'd love to have a conversation if there's any way that we can come alongside you. We also have some those gatherings I mentioned. If you go to you'll see at the top a tab that says gatherings. We just opened signups for the 3 that we're doing this winter. We still have room for our Chicago one for the larger churches as well.
And you've got a monthly thing that you do remotely for folks too, right? If you can't
Yep.
make an
We
actual content
monthly
conference.
virtual cohort that we do on the 4th Monday of every month, and, information on this website about that as well.
Tim, thank you for making time for this. Really appreciate your time. Really appreciate your friendship. You've been a great partner to us over the years. And by the way, thank you for sending Kelly's story our way. She's been a tremendous blessing and asset to the firm and to our clients based on her experience at Willow and as a lawyer. And we appreciate you making that connection.
And is one of my pickleball partners, so she's amazing.
Oh, is she better than you?
She is better than me most days.
That is
Maybe 1 out of 10 days, I could best her, but she's better than me most days.
that is awesome. Great to see you, man. Thank you for making time.
Good to see you.
Thank you for listening. I'm extremely grateful for executive pastors that love the church. If something from today's conversation resonated with you, encouraged you, challenged you, or reminded you that you're not alone in this role, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment or share this with another executive pastor or leader who came to mind while you were listening. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every listen, share, subscription, and comment helps build stronger executive pastors and moves the church forward.